So right now we are in very fuzzy times, okay? The economy's not doing that great. China and Russia are making different moves. But overall, when you think about a depression and a recession or even a potential WAR, the answer is people never really seem to understand what this actually implies. They always think, for example, hey, the housing market might go down or the stock market might go down, like all these things that are kind of like there that might go down, but they don't actually see what will happen in their real daily lives and how this is actually going to affect them. So before things get even worse or potentially get to that point, I really want to make this video to actually tell you exactly what can you personally do to prepare for when things don't actually go that well. And most likely, if it doesn't happen now, it will happen eventually, and you will experiment or experience this actually happening to you at a certain point. So this might be worse than 2008. It might be worse than 1929. Who knows exactly, okay? But in this video, we're gonna do everything we can to prep for the absolute worst. So as always, guys, like this video on top about also subscribe, hit the bell to get notified, and this way you get up-to-date information on everything going on. And by the way, subscribing is also free. Now, the very first thing, guys, is this. I want you guys to basically forget about the idea of cash being king. What is king is actually income. When people think about a depression, recession, they say stocks are gonna go down, but I'm not investing into stocks. I don't care about that stuff, okay? But overall, people forget that stocks are actual businesses, and actual businesses have real decisions to make when it comes to they're not making enough money and they have to respond to investors, and that might mean, for example, several layoffs, okay? And that's where we're seeing companies like Google and Facebook and more companies out there, McDonald's, they're basically doing major layoffs. They're laying people off, and those are real people with real jobs losing them. And that's a problem, okay? So one of the biggest events that happened in 2008 that is not mentioned that often is basically we had around 8.8 million jobs that were basically lost. And unemployment rate went up to around 10%. This is very real because most people out there, you will not have enough cash in your bank to say cash is king, but you can usually have an income to support your lifestyle in a sense. And that's why I say income is king. If you can make money, you always have a chance to actually go out there and prosper in a sense. But as far as, for example, if you lose your source of income, what do you have exactly? Okay, so what can you do to prep for these certain things actually happen? And the first thing is you cannot control anything here. If you get laid off, you get laid off, okay? We have unemployment. We have a bunch of things here and there, yes, but a certain thing is, okay, the type of job you're in is very important. So certain jobs will always be in demand. Like, for example, being an accountant or being a nurse and so on. So these jobs will always be in business. But if these are not the jobs you like, you got to make sure that the job you are in is a solid job and you have other options just in case something happens, okay? So prep for the worst. Now, number two is you want to make sure you have at least 3 to 6 months worth of emergencies saved up in your bank account, a separate account. This way, the big thing is, okay, usually when you get fired, you get laid off, you have, for example, unemployment, that's around 3 months or so, but you also want to have those 3 to 6 months extra. This way you have time to find a potential better job. Now, when times get really bad, you don't have the luxury of choosing what you actually like. You just choose something, but you want to make sure you actually have money on the side to make sure you still have the freedom to kind of search around if what you actually like actually pops up. But that's what you usually want to do, okay? Remember, income is king. So basically the skill you have is going to be super important. The job you pick, super important. Having money on the side to support yourself in case things get worse, the answer is that is also super important. Now, number two, guys, is this, okay? During 2008, the S&P 500, it fell by around 40%. And it took a whole 5 years for it to actually recover. Now, I know when you think about this from like 2023, it doesn't seem like a big deal, right? Like, oh, 5 years, not that big deal, right? But you gotta imagine, right? You're in 2008, things are running hectic, you wanted to retire, and now all of a sudden you have to wait 5 more years to actually retire. So imagine you're 65 years old, you gotta wait 5 more years. So now you went from having, for example, an extra 12 years or so of life to now only about 7 more good years or whatever. My point is, okay, guys, when it comes to stock market falling, remember, a lot of people retirement accounts are basically entangled with this whole thing because retirement accounts also fell by around 25% or so. So what can you do to make sure that the market actually goes down, you're still safe, and you can still be on pace to actually retire? The answer is going to be you want to remove all the friction in your life, so this way you can actually withstand a lot of friction in your life. Here's what I mean exactly. If you have a bunch of bills, responsibilities, debt, well, if you lose your job, things don't work out that well, those bills are still going to be there. But the less bills you actually have, the less responsibilities you have, the more opportunity you actually have to basically get things in order. So one big thing is going to be, for example, make sure you try to get out of debt as fast as you possibly can. So if you actually have extra money left over, use that money to pay off all your debt except the mortgage. But imagine when things get bad, if you have a fully funded emergency account and you also have no debt, what you have is a lot less things to worry about. Because if you lose your income, you can still figure it out. But if you lose your income and the market also goes down, and the market also goes down, okay, and you have all these bills to pay, well, things don't look that good whatsoever. So it's very important you actually get this done. On top of that, consider, for example, where you live for it not to be more than a third of your monthly income. This way, if things go bad, you're not like the average person where you're basically housing costs like 40 to 50% of your actual income. That is a massive amount of stress on your income, and that's not what you actually want. Now, the third point I want to make is that during these times, usually you might have times of deflation or times of inflation. And inflation is normal, but hyperinflation is a problem. And deflation is basically, if you have cash, your cash is going to be able to buy a lot more things, but it's also going to be a lot harder to actually make more money, because deflation is basically the dollar actually going up in value because that same dollar can actually buy more things, okay? Which is actually kind of extreme, but it happened in 1929. But when you have hyperinflation, it's basically saying, hey, your dollar loses value and it cannot buy the same amount of goods anymore. It actually requires you to have more money to be able to buy the same amount of goods. Now, you usually think that, hey, I don't want to have a lot of money saved. I don't want to be investing because usually the market's going down. But in reality, your only choice is usually to have some money in savings, but to have most of your money basically invested. And here's why. Remember, when you think about the stock market, think about you're buying businesses. So whenever prices have to go up, who is raising those prices? The answer is businesses are, okay? So when inflation goes up, the best place to have your money is going to be in the hands of these businesses via stocks, for example, because this way, well, guess what? If inflation goes up, then businesses are just going to go ahead and raise prices, and people will have to adjust and pay for those goods either way. So in reality, the best vehicle to have your money during times of inflation is going to be in stocks, because bonds, well, guess what? They're going to be less valuable. And in reality, when you think about it, okay, guys, here's another point here. You still want to have some money in savings, but you don't want to have a bunch of money because you know that money is going to lose a ton of value. But for example, you should have your emergency account and you should not be worried about, for example, inflation. On top of that, if you have money saved, for example, for an expense the next 3 to 5 years, that's fine. But if you have money in there for the next 5 years or so, usually you want to have that money invested. That way you're actually good to go. Now there are bonds, for example, like inflation protected tips or whatever, or like tips, inflation protected, what do you call it? Tips are inflation, what? Treasury inflation protected securities. That's what they stand for, okay? That's basically investments or bonds you basically make that they adjust for inflation based on the rate, and that way you kind of retain the same exact value, but it's not actually making you any money. It's just basically adjusting for inflation. So that's why I don't recommend that much, but in reality, you could have your money in stocks, and stocks will adjust and prices will go up because basically it is businesses you're actually putting your money into. So remember, during times of hyperinflation, you have to keep investing, because if the market is down, you're able to buy things at a discount. But more importantly, you're also putting your money into assets that can basically perform and make you more money, and your money will not be dead in a way. Now, number four, guys, is if you get into depression recession, you might see, for example, home prices actually go down and plummet. But in reality, it's why you should never be worried about the market when it comes to the context of actually buying a home. When you buy a home, it is a personal decision. It's not really, for example, an investment, because in a sense, once you associate all the costs of owning a home and what you actually get to sell the property for, you basically just break even over time. So in reality, when you buy a home, you want to buy a home that basically is no more than a third of your monthly income on a 15-year mortgage, and a home is an investment. Is basically just a tool to lower your cost of living, thus lower your risks, okay? It's the biggest wealth building tool in that sense because it allows you to build more wealth. But imagine, okay, you buy a home this way, you're able to pay it off a lot faster. If your cost of living goes down by that much because you have no mortgage anymore, the answer is you're able to have a lot more money for more investing. If you lose your job, that's fine because you don't have to pay rent anymore or a mortgage anymore whatsoever. So your cost of living is a lot lower. Now, here's the fifth thing that I actually want to talk about here, okay, guys? Here are some extreme things that I basically did during these times to make sure that when these times actually come, whether it's today or tomorrow, I'm going to be more likely to be fine. First of all, I have what I called an emergency budget. This is basically a budget where if things get hard, if things get tough, it's what I basically need to basically survive, okay? I'm saying basically too much, okay? But it's what I need to survive, all right? It's my emergency budget where I cut everything, all the fat, is just basically lean after that, all right? Then number two, I saved up for 2 years worth of emergencies with this lean budget, all right? This way, things get bad, I have 2 years to be able to figure this out. But I only did this, okay, once I was debt free, once I saved 6 months, once I had a paid off home, and so on. And that's the next thing. I paid off a home. Now that home, I'm currently in the process of actually selling it, okay? So when that home is sold, I'm still going to retain that money, set it aside to buy another home later on in the future. But you always want to have, for me personally, want to have that money there to buy a home in cash again, because in reality, this way your cost of living is a lot lower. These are extreme things that I basically did to make sure that when times get difficult, I'm able to live on less than $1,000 per month. And that makes a big difference because virtually doing almost any job out there, you're able to make at least that. And that's the big difference, okay? So when these times come, whether it's today or tomorrow, and I hope it's tomorrow, right? Like everybody else, but this way you're actually prepped and prepared. Removing the friction, having a good income, controlling your expenses, and focusing, for example, on investing and growing your wealth and not basically spending money like crazy, all right? So thanks for watching this video, guys. Made it all the way to the end. It's a little long, a little extreme, but it's well worth it because when times come, at least you can say you're prepped and you know exactly what to do. So if you made it all the way to the end of the video, comment down below, ready, so I know you actually made it all the way to the end of this video. On top of that, also, up here's another video, over my face. And on top, as always, long-term team officially out. By the way, follow me on Instagram at TommyBryson. Peace.